Hi, I'm Nia Bennett, and I'm doing a sociological presentation in analysis on the literary things of identity formation, particularly with trans people and the formation of names. So, first going over of what is naming and chosen name by extension. There's what is the functions of naming for both internal and external forces. Where does gender threat play into this and performativity as well? The themes that many trans people choose to go by, go against in their chosen name process. How stereotype plays into this, particularly with many experiences, and especially my own, and accommodation, a very underutilized and underlooked a part of naming yourself as a trans person. So, what is a name and how are we named? Naming is mostly brought about by parents, either when we were born, and the name is formed before birth. There's often two names given to a kid based on their gender assigned at birth, of either masculine or feminine, and based on what the doctor says, that is the name the child would then go by. Names also tell you, besides last names being a signifier of your family, they're very cultural based and sometimes status based, especially with lineage names of being named after your previous successors. Chosen names, by contrast, are chosen at a later date and boil down to this is my name. For a trans person, it's extremely common and somewhat expected to change your name in the community. And also, it's thought of as the middling step in the process of transitioning. Now, what the internally, having your name confirmed. This is the reason why you want people to call you by the name you say. It is gender affirming. Now, that is a feeling that the identity you have is being confirmed and when that confirmation of identity is made, then internally you feel better. Your mental stress goes down, your quality of life increases, and that can be brought about by pronouns, correct names, and it also works as a self-internalization. As this quote talks about, the process of other people affirming your gender makes you feel more strongly about your own feelings of gender. Now, externally, the naming process is very performativity. If there's naming yourself is often very gendered. Binary trans people choose names that are heavily gendered. As Nia, I've chosen that name. I chose it because I wanted a feminine name to represent my identity, even if it doesn't immediately communicate that I am feminine. And then it also worked with gender non-conforming people who have names that are not explicitly gendered often if they do change their name, because the ambiguity or the lack of gender is the point of their name. They're communicating to another party that their name's not gendered, therefore they are not gendered. This goes hand in hand with Judith Butler's approach to performativity of gender, where the actor as a trans person is communicating to others of their gender based on their names. Me saying my name is Nia makes you think that my pronouns are she, her, despite me not saying so. That is a strategic choice I made to get gendered correctly more often. And sometimes names work against that, as some gender neutral names people hold want or are thinking about are thrown away or not considered because there is ambiguity in what their identity is. My dead name is gender neutral, but I did not feel like it communicated to others that I was feminine. Now, what the identity of who is changing their names, how often? What I found striking was 80% of people change their first name, but there's still a striking amount who have changed their last name. In this identity formation, the first name is the primary gendered one, which is why it is a much higher statistic. The last names are normally seen as completely like non-gendered because in the family unit, a father and a mother both have the same last name. Last names, on counts of the research has like shown, people can change them based on ill relationships with the family or some later marriage. The people who are most likely to change their name are binary trans people, with trans feminine and trans masculine people changing their names most often, while non-binary and gender non-confirming people tend to stick with their original name more often, yet still a high amount of people who do change their name. It also is very like internal process of the person who's changed their name often wants to change it with no other outside influences, though a very common trope is family connections of asking your mother and father to choose a new chosen name that reflects your new gender identity, shown by the 22% there. One very common type of naming is the gender bending of a name, so common example being John to Jane, of that type of just like immediate like same feeling of name, same like almost same syllables, but it is either masculine or feminized, just swap to the other side. That is a very effective tool in that it communicates that you're similarly the same person, but it also says you're different. It is the most common type of stereotype. A lot of pop culture and media, if they have a trans person, this is the naming convention they're most likely to follow, particularly with trans feminine people, which also are the people who are most likely to have a variant of the birth name as their chosen name, possibly overrepresented, but trans masculine and non-binary people often, or somewhat, choose to lean out of the stereotype and embrace other naming conventions. There's also, on the complete opposite side, the tendency to have a completely new identity. The transition is a complete reformation of the self. And changing the name to something completely different communicates to people that this is a completely new person. Having the gender swapped name often communicates that there's not as much change, or people feel like that. I felt like that, and I wanted a drastically new name to feel authentic in my representation and not clinging on to a past view of myself. It's a way to form a new identity. Now, one untalked about thing is what people don't choose as the name. There's a common phenomenon of stereotype threat where people are afraid to confirm negative stereotypes about their community. In this particular case, there is someone from naming themselves, and they wanted to name themselves after a reality TV star. That didn't sit well with them with the connotation of the actor and the reality star, so they decided to not go with that name. So I personally dealt with this a lot, in the sense that I had named myself after a character called Nia from a video game, Xenoblade Chronicles. Initially, I was really attached to this name, but I did not like the connotation that it was named with a video game character. What was able to treat my stereotype threat was a research paper on identity formation in witches, where they also were very distant from pop culture associations from themselves, as they reported that the media did not influence their identity of self, but they reported that other people, like pop culture experiences, shaped their identity. This led me to interpret that pop culture did help me form my identity. This character did help me change. And there's a very common trans femme stereotype, specifically with trans femme, somewhat with trans masc, but that choosing off of like a video game character. But I denied it for several years as I did not want to fit into that stereotype. So trans people often think about the stereotypes of like the gender swap name or a completely new thing and navigate their own identity with these in mind. Naming is also very accommodating in the sense of trans people make concessions when they make a name. This example up here, this person did not want to try names too often, as the people they were close to did not want them to try and keep changing their name for the concern of others. There's also like honoring family is a very common trope of asking your mother and father for a new name for your chosen name as a form of honoring family and garnering greater like acceptance. And there's also like the tendency to keep that last name shows that you're accommodating your family even if your identity is completely changed. You're still attached to where you grew up and who raised you. Like there's also on the variation on the existing name is a common trading way of tackling names, as people who knew your old name will easier adjust to the new name, as they won't be confused as often because it's as similar, and also having like sounding the same as you're recognizing it, having the same syllables, the same starting letter. That the click of hearing your name is more often associated when you have something closer to your original birth name. And it's also practical. People tend to choose names that are easier to pronounce and like more common. The weirder name, they feel like they're not going to be as respected. It's also like keeping your birth name as your middle name. You need legal paperwork. If your initials are important to your email and you change your name, then there is a lot of work that goes in. So people try and choose names that accommodate those type of things. And thank you.